Welcome to What God Has Done With My Pain. Today we have Arielle, who has been so incredibly kind to jump onto the podcast today after moving. So imagine moving and then also still making time to be on a podcast. So incredibly grateful. Um, but yeah, with Ari being on the podcast, I just want to go ahead and kind of jump into, of course, what God has done with my pain. But before we do so, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you up to now? Like, what do you like to do? What are your little quirks and whatnot?
Yes. So, like you were saying, my name is Arielle. I just finished moving, like you mentioned. I was a Florida girly. I grew up in Florida, and then a month ago, um, I moved my life over to Texas. So it's definitely been an adjustment, but basically I moved over here for a dance program. It's been so amazing. We're able to like do ministry as well as like train, and like it has been such an insane blessing. So that is honestly what takes up the most of my time is that. And if I'm not dancing, one of my other hobbies is like writing. I love writing like spoken words and poetry, and like that always holds like such a special place in my heart. But yeah, that's a little bit about myself. Just the last month, was just me trying to get used to Texas because I'm also an only
Mm,
child. So that has been very different for me because now I'm living with like three other
yeah,
girls. So just that, it was like, oh, um, things don't
no
stay where
longer
I
your own
leave them.
space.
Yeah, it's no longer my own space. But even in that, the Lord has been like stretching me and like growing me so much. But I'm just excited like for what He's gonna
Wow.
do in this next season. But that's a little like jump in into who I am and what I've been doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Have you always done dance, or is that something that popped up recently?
So dance was always like a part of my life. That was something that I like always enjoyed doing.
Mm,
Like my mom put me in like a class when like I was little, and like that was like kind of like the thing that I did. And then like in church I was always involved in like dance ministries and like stuff like that. I just never thought that
mm,
like the Lord would allow me to do it on a professional level. So that has been like so new to me and like insane. But dance has always been like, growing up, I was very extroverted. We'll get into this. I was very
mm,
extroverted, and then like I guess as pain comes, you start kind of like
mm,
enclosing in, and I became very like introverted, and I like stopped like
yeah.
sharing and expressing, and then like dance was my way of being able to be like, this is what I'm feeling and I don't know how to say it, but like I can move my body, and like you can
Mm,
kind of see how I feel. So that dance holds an insane like place in my heart, because like when you go through things and you like kind of shut down and you don't want to speak about them, that's been like the way of me like,
mm,
okay, this is my therapy, like this is how I speak to the Lord, but it's also how I like share with others like kind of what I've been through and how I'm feeling in those moments. But yeah, dance has always been a
mm.
part of my life since I was like itty
I
bitty.
love I love how you said that. That was so beautiful because just like normalizing not being able to like verbally express
Mm,
oneself, but
yes.
being able to find other ways, whether it's through painting or art or journaling or just using your body, what the Lord gave
Yes.
you to kind of like fully immerse yourself, but express yourself at the same way. Like that, I could not have said it better myself because and I say that because I'm like I wouldn't have the words. So I loved how you
Yeah.
said that. And so I'm gonna ask, like, what was, little Ari like? Like what was she like before that transition happened where she didn't want to express herself verbally anymore,
Yes.
where she did kind of like close people off?
Right. So, growing up, like my mom says that like I literally would be like in stores, like singing and dancing, and like I would like be like I would like talk to people, and like I was friends with like every worker at the grocery store. Like I was best friends with them. They knew my name. Like I would make bright bracelets and like sell it to them. I was like so extroverted. In school, like even since like kindergarten, like the teachers would be like, she's like very much a leader, and like that was like always like kind of like my like attitude. I was very like out there and like big and loud and like just like I would say my opinion like the way it would come forth and like just like very out there. um I was like I loved like performing like in at that time, like when I did like dance like at the studio, I would like love performing, and I loved like the stage and the makeup, and like that was what I enjoyed. I just loved like
Mm.
just really being out there and just being like so free in a sense. So yeah, very much talkative, a lot, a lot.
Wow.
I was extremely talkative, like as a kid growing up. My mom says that I would talk to absolutely everybody anywhere. Like it didn't matter who it was. I would always be talking. But yeah.
I imagine there being a language barrier, and you're like, "That's fine. We can figure this out. We can talk anyways."
Honestly. I'd be like, I'll just show you a dance. Like but no, I was like
That
so extroverted as a kid.
that is so beautiful, though. It really does. I think I talked about this a while ago, a few episodes back with someone, but like, there's something beautiful when you remember what it was like to be a child, like
Mm,
when you were a kid and what that was like.
yes.
And there's so much joy behind that because it's like once we grow and we become adults and we, develop, it's hard to go back to that. If anything, like
Yeah.
it's like that part of us goes to sleep and
Mm,
we either rediscover what it's like waking them up because in the Bible it talks about being a child and being a child of
yes.
God, and like at any point I feel like God could have said and be a grown adult or be a young adult, but
Mm,
like he referenced child a lot, and I think that there's so much
yeah.
beauty in that memory of you being little and like selling bracelets and talking to anyone, and just starting conversation and dancing and being so bubbly, because that kind of shows how God made you, what he had
Yes.
in mind when he made you with no filter or anything at all.
Mm,
So I love, 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 love that because it's so true to you and your character. And so I also wanted to kind of dive into that because like you talked about being that and then like slowly it transitioned out. So what was that like? Like why was there that like transition? But what was that like for you? Because your normalcy was I'm gonna talk, I'm gonna do this, and then there's that shift where you're not doing that anymore.
yeah. I feel like I was so like I said, I grew up like an only child. So I feel like already as an only child, you grow up kind of like around adults and like you just kind of grow up a little faster just because I wasn't like hanging out with kids like my own age and everything like that. But I think what was like my breaking point into kind of like curving into myself and like not letting people in was I would say I was right around I was like 9 or 10. I had like think I just had turned 10. But right around this time, there was just so much had been going on in my life. Like I grew up like a pretty like privileged kid. Like I was an only child, but we lived in like a two-story house. Like the house was like 3,000 square feet. Like it was it was massive. Like and that I grew up with like big Christmases and like just so much like that the Lord had like blessed us with. But right around this season, my dad ended up like losing his job, so there was like no income coming in, and we were like, okay, like that's okay, but like how do we kind of like manage this? And then in the May of that year, I remember like this morning I had woken up and my parents were going to take me to like one of my friends' birthday parties. And I went and my mom was supposed to go and like she was just going to be there with us, and then like I remember that they dropped me off and they were like, "Hey, like we'll just come pick you up later." I was like, okay, like I didn't really think anything of it. And then when I my mom ended up calling me, she was like, "Hey, like I'm at the doctor's, like just to like let you know." I had just had a stomach virus, so she had told me that it was the same thing and that it was like nothing to worry about. So I was like, okay. And then my dad picked me up, and my mom wasn't in the car, and I was like, this is a little bit odd. And I just remember that being like the quietest car ride like I had ever had. Like it was so quiet on the way home, like there wasn't any words said, and then I can like so vividly see it. But the turn right before like we would turn into our house, I asked, I was like, where's mom? And then that was when my dad was like, she's not coming home today. And
Mm.
I was like, what do you mean? Like, I
Yeah.
didn't understand that. And then come to find out, like, during this process, my mom was actually internally bleeding. So it wasn't a stomach virus. But what we thought was going to be like one night and a little stomach virus turned into 2 months of my mom being in the hospital. She was diagnosed with a pancreatic tumor. That's one of the most like deadliest forms of cancer. They just take people like this. Um,
Mm.
so during that season, it was so tough for me because my mom like was my best friend. Like she was my I was an only child. Like that was all
Yeah.
I had. Like I had my parents and like that was really it. So during that season, I remember like I would go into the hospital like every single day after school. And that just became a constant for me. It was like, okay, I would go to school, go into the hospital, but then there was like a little bit of like anger that started settling in and I was like,
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
want this like to be the last thing like that I see of my mom. And I was like, if the Lord takes my mom like right now, she's never going to see me grow up. She's never going to see me dance. She's never going to see like anything. And then
Mm.
that's when I was like, no, like I need to hold it together. And then I feel like my
Mm.
demeanor changed. And then like my mom, like we talk about it now, but I hadn't been able to talk about it for a very long time. But during
Yeah.
those 2 months, like I didn't hug my mom and like at all. Like
Mm.
there like I would walk into the room and I would stand at the door and I would be like, no, like, I don't want
Mm.
to get near her. I don't want to see her. And then I just felt like I needed to be like so strong and like I needed to hold it all in because she was going through it. Like, my mom was like about to die. And I was like, she needs people like more than I do. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm fine. Like, I can hold it in. Like, I got it. I got it. So that was like how I kind of like started becoming. And it was like, nope, I got it. Like, are you okay? Yep, I'm fine. I got it. Like, and that
Mm.
translated into
Yeah.
like every area of my life. Um, but I remember like during that time, like that was kind of like where I started finding writing. Because when you don't have anybody to
Mm.
talk to or you don't allow yourself to talk to anybody, um,
Yeah.
during that time, like I would literally, my mom found it like months after she came
Mm.
back home like from the hospital, but it was literally like letters of me like begging God to like let my mom stay. And I was like, Lord, like
Mm.
I just want like my mom to see me grow up. I was like, there's like you're 10. Like you barely like
Yeah.
lived. And I'm like, there's so much like ahead of me and like there's so much that I need my mom there for, that it was like just like it was
Mm.
so tough. But even after like my mom got out of the hospital and things, like it was just so much anger that was like built up, like almost in the sense that I felt like betrayed, in a sense of like the Lord betraying me. And I was like,
Yeah.
God, like we've served you, like we've
Mm.
been good. And it's like, why did like what did we do to deserve this? And that was kind of like the attitude. Like I just became so like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, and that was
Mm.
when I'd say that was like the point of me kind of starting to be like, no, like no, you're not going to get
Yeah.
anything out of me. Like you're going to ask me how I am and I'm going to tell you that I'm okay and I can put up with it. And I don't need anybody
Yeah.
and I don't need to rely on anybody. So that was kind of like the big major turning point. But then like even after, I mean, depending on how this conversation goes, I'll get into like a little bit of
Yeah.
that as well. But that was like I feel like the main marker of like the flip of like, oh,
Yeah.
the little
There's that.
Ari like kind of got like torn away and was like,
Yeah.
no, I don't, we're not really gonna let her out anymore. We'll just like push her on the side. But that's what I would say was like the main like turning point for me.
Wow. Wow. And that's because at that age too, that's not an easy thing to live with. Like to sit there and watch your mother in the hospital being an only child and knowing that your parents, like, that's your family. That's your
Hmm.
family. And to see one of them, in a hospital, but it can be so difficult. And so I think one, it's beautiful that you were able to write letters, even if you weren't able to speak, on the
Hmm.
topic so much. But I also think that like it's so strong to see a 10-year-old writing to God and like through from the heart, not the like, prayer it's like, thank you for today. No, like this is
Yeah,
from you're saying like I'm only 10. I want her in my life. Like there's so much more I need her for.
right.
Um and so so I'm guessing you grew up in a home that like, Jesus was in, like your parents taught you and took you to church, or was that just like something that you carried with you?
Yes. So my when my parents like met, neither of them were Christian. My dad was like more on the Catholic side. And then as I started growing up, like I'd say like right around like 2, my mom, that was when my mom like found the Lord. And like
Mm,
even like me, my parents couldn't have kids, and like my mom received a word from God, but she didn't know it was God. And then like they waited for me 7 years, and then that's like when I like came along. But right around like 2, that was when my mom like really started like giving her life to like the Lord. And
wow.
during that year of my mom giving her life to the Lord, and then my dad was like go to like Catholic church. I was a kind of in between, um, and like my mom tells me that she's like, oh, every morning like I'd be like, no, I want to go with my dad, and my mom was like, no, like you're gonna come with me, and it was just like kind of that back and forth. But
Yeah.
my dad like ended up coming to the Lord a little bit after. And
Mm,
then I'd say like right around the age of like 4 or 5, like we were fully devoted in church. And like that transition like for my dad as well, like they're pastors now, but it was something like so fast,
wow.
like, and the amount of knowledge and like just wisdom that my dad had so rapidly was like something that only like came from the Lord. But so as much as I can remember, like I grew up in like a Christian household, always in church. um I remember like sleeping like in the chairs, like while my parents were in meetings. So I grew up in
Mm,
church, and then like something that I'm grateful for, that my parents made it more than like just church. I feel like when we came home, like it was
yeah.
still a topic that was like so talked about. Um, I like knew about the Lord not because of church, but because I saw them live it, and because like they
Mm,
instilled it in me. And it was like, okay, like we'll have time, or like you seek the Lord. And like even like from being so little, like I remember like doing like little projects of like what Genesis spoke
oh,
about, and like just stuff like that. It was just like
yeah.
it was something so sweet, like growing up in a household that instills like Jesus in you. But yeah, so I did grow
Mm,
up in like a household that was Christian.
that's so, so beautiful. Oh my goodness. I love that because it's like the seeds that they planted in
Yes,
you.
definitely.
Um, and I wanted to ask earlier when you talked about that anger, like what was that like? Because now you're going from happy and bubbly, and now you have this anger introduced. You have anger that you're learning to manage, and you're writing these letters. But also, it's like your mom does come home, but you said like you had this anger festering inside of you, and you're living with that. So what was that like? Whilst clearly you were writing to God, and you had a relationship with Him, but you also talked about kind of being angry with God, and um,
Hmm.
I think it's good to talk on that topic because to normalize being angry with God, like
Right.
I think I was reading Jeremiah recently, and I think even he got upset because he's like, I'm so tired of telling them they're going to die if they don't
Hmm.
repent. And he said, like, I don't want to do this anymore. But, of course he kept doing so because he describes it as a fire within him that he can't, shut off. So, what was that like for you at that age, feeling angry at God, which is such a normal feeling to feel in such a season?
Right. So yeah, I feel like that, like I had mentioned, that was kind of like the point of me being angry with the Lord. And I feel like if things would have maybe gotten a little bit better after my mom had gotten out of the hospital, like that anger would have gone away. But honestly, like the case was that it got like so much worse after my mom left the
Mm,
hospital. So during that time, like I said, I grew up like I lived like right across the street from my family. Like my aunts and like uncles and grandma like lived across the street, and like we would like switch from like Christmas to Thanksgiving, like who would do what in whose house. And like we
mm,
were just such a like tight knit family, and Christmases were like the most extravagant thing like ever for us.
Oh.
And like during that time, like my family was there for me, but right after that, we kind of started like slowly losing everything. Like my mom's hospital bills were so much. My dad had no work. So we ended up losing our house. Um
Mm.
we literally like went from like everything to nothing so rapidly. Randomly my dog got lymphoma and died as well. Like there was just so much
Not the
like in the
dog.
matter of like 2 years. Like we lost the house and my dog died and then my mom's going through all of this. And then like to top it all off, like there was so much family conflicts going on. And then my like closest family ends up being like ripped away from me as well. Like during this time,
Mm.
like I like lose what it is to have like a Christmas, and not because we don't have money, but because
Yeah.
they stopped calling. I stopped getting calls for my birthday. Like we lose Christmas and birthdays, and like now suddenly it's like I don't know who my family is, and like all of these things like start continuing to like build up, and the anger like just keeps on like building and building and building, and like something that was like so not simple because it wasn't simple, but something that was
Yeah.
like so small, and like I had felt like I was angry at the Lord because I felt like he was betraying me. Now I'm starting to like feel betrayal from like my closest family and like the people that were supposed to care about me the most. And it's like, okay, like I truly have nobody. Like that was like what I like started putting out there. So like even then it became like so much more. Like there was just so much going on like around me, and like I said, like I didn't want to express it. I had nobody to express it to. Because in my head as well, I was like, Lord, these are the people that like you gave to take care of me. Like I feel like when you're little, like you think that like family is like supposed to be there, but now it's like, man, if
Yeah.
these are the people that are supposed to love me and they don't love me, how is anybody else gonna love me? Like, how are you gonna love me? Like, it's hard to accept like even the love
Mm.
of the Lord because we get so caught up in like this worldly love, and it's like we start seeing like reflections of love and like so many different things, and it's like no, but like the Lord's love is so unconditional, but it gets so tainted because of what we pick up and like the love that we pick up, and a love that's so like easily broken over like trivial
Yeah.
things. um so it would just like kept like building up, and like I feel like this process like of like losing the house and like growing up, like then the whole family like situation, I that started like right around when I was like 9 or 10 with my mom being in the hospital, and then like I think it like led up until, well, it's still something that like I've been going through like with family wise, but like just the back like the back and forth of it. I
Yeah.
think it was literally like 3 years of like constant things, and it was like, okay, like
Mm.
what else are what else is gonna come our way? Like we're ready for it. And that was like kind of the attitude that I was like, I don't care. If you're in my life, you're in my life. If you're not, you're not. Like
Wow.
everything has been taken from me. Like doesn't even matter at this
Yeah.
point. But I think something that sustained me so much, like after that season, um, was the story of Job. Like when you go
Mm.
and you read that story,
Yeah.
and like you're fighting with the Lord, because like that was my fight. I was like, Lord, like we've served you, like we've been in church, like my parents
Mm.
are like some
Yeah.
of the most loyal, faithful, like loving people. And like now I'm starting to see how they're being treated by like family members and like outside people. And I'm like, man, like, Lord, like, I don't want to like keep living like this, keep living in like a form of like feeling like you just keep like, I just felt like the Lord wasn't seeing me and wasn't seeing my
Yeah.
family and all of our sacrifice. So then, when you find the
Mm.
story of Job, like, and you're in that mentality, it's like the Lord, like, makes you be quiet, like, so fast. Because we see it in, like,
Yeah.
Job, literally everything gets taken from Job, and then like once his like body is touched and like he's like dealing with sicknesses and everything like that, like that's when
Mm.
we see like the Lord come into the conversation, and it's like it's that verse that's like, where were you when I created like the heavens and the earth? Like we know
Mm.
absolutely
Yeah.
nothing, and like we're not in a place to like question his greatness and question like his goodness. um Something I like wrote a spoken word about my mom, but something that I wrote at the end of it, that was I wrote, even if like the Lord were to take my mom, like the Lord is still good. And it's so difficult to understand that concept, because when you're going through it, like in your flesh, it's like a good God wouldn't let a 10-year-old go through this. A good God wouldn't
Yeah.
allow so much anger, wouldn't allow so much pain at such an early age. But the reality is that, like, if I wouldn't have gone through all that, I would have never seen different sides of the Lord. I would have never learned
Mm.
who the Lord is as a healer, who the Lord is as a provider. Like, those are things that facets of the Lord that I would have never seen if I would have never experienced that. And like
Wow.
that's his goodness and that's his mercy, is that we go through things so he can show like new sides of who he is, because he's so good. Sometimes he needs to strip everything from us so that we can rely on him and we can see like the greatness of him. So a lot of times I feel like we think that his goodness is him giving us stuff, but a lot of times his goodness is
Mm.
taking everything from us so that we can rely on him and actually commune with him and like know who he is and like the
Wow.
different facets of him. But yeah, I kind of rambled. But
No, that was so good. Like I wouldn't say rambled because I think that I mean, I think it sounded incredible. It really spoke. I think what you said spoke really beautiful about reality. You know, what
mm,
happens? What do you do when you lose everything? When everything is stripped from you? And knowing God in the valley, and you were in the valley for about 3 years. So what is it like to give everything to God, to not have control of anything and hand that control over to God? So I really loved how you said it because it's humbling. It's so humbling because, we're just based on materialistic things and that's
right.
our value and that's how we worship God on what he gives us. Then are we truly worshiping God for who he is?
Mm,
Just and merciful God. And, I wanted to ask you, what did you do after you lost the house? Like you're losing your family. Like, what, I'm like that support system wasn't there, and you're feeling rejected, and like you're not even, you're just not there from your family. What was that like losing the house? What did you guys do? And then you also talked about getting to know God as a healer and as a provider. So, how was that experience for you?
right. So during that season, like I said, like I grew up like very like privileged, thank like the Lord. But it was literally we went from like I remember like we packed up like a two-story house. Like it was like three living rooms and like five bedrooms.
Wow.
And like we literally went from that to like a itty bitty like apartment. And like we had to like
Mm.
we sold everything, and it was just like because like we were about to like lose the house, like there we were about to be like evicted. So we ended up like
Mm.
selling it like as fast as we could, and like we didn't have time to like hold on to things, like it was just like take it and go, like whatever.
Yeah.
But during that,
Yeah.
I feel like the last honestly like since then, I feel like my life has been made up of so much like inconsistencies, um not because of things on purpose, but just because of so much change and so much like, oh, here we go again, moving to a new house. Now we're moving to a new apartment. And it's like, oh, okay, like
Mm.
just having to get, I feel like I needed to get used to like that back and forth of not having like consistency. And there were so many things in my life that were so inconsistent. Um, but something that like now the Lord has been like speaking over me and like revealing to me is just like it's
Mm.
been having to take me back and be like, the only thing that has been consistent has been the Lord. And it's been me having to take time and be like, okay, Lord, in this season, like, where were you? Like, and having to like truly sit down and like see where the Lord has been. And like, even in the things that like don't make sense as to where the Lord was, but be like, okay, like, this is where you were and this is where you are. And like, seeing that, I feel like now, like, years later is where I'm starting to see where he has been and where he has like remained. But yeah, no, I feel like there was a lot of
Yeah.
like inconsistencies. But then my dad is my dad is amazing. He is such like a goal oriented, like, very like, he'll take the word from the Lord and like run with it. And it's just so
Mm,
amazing to like see that, because like that pushes you to like be able to do the same. But during that season, like after we had like lost everything, like I feel like it's so easy to just kind of sit and like mope and like be like, we lost everything. And like, for a season, like, yes, like that's what was going on. But my dad ended up like, he created like a new business and like gave it on to the Lord. And 3 years after,
mm,
like, everything, like, because of his step of him giving it to the Lord, like everything started like flourishing. And like, honestly, like, I just relate to the story of Job, but like everything that
yeah.
like we had lost was like slowly like given back to us in like ways that we didn't even
Mm,
understand. But it was just like so beautiful to see that, and to be like, we have lost everything and like we are not in a space to like have anything. But like slowly, when we were like, Lord, like, take take everything, like we have nothing, but like what I
mm,
give to you like is my heart. Something that like a story that my dad always like says is that during this time, the like offering basket was going around, and like we like truly had nothing, like we didn't even have like enough money for like
mm,
lunch that day. And he said that like as the
yeah.
offering basket was coming around, he was like, Lord, I have nothing. But he says that like so symbolically he grabbed his heart and like put it in the basket. He was like,
Oh,
Lord, I have
wow.
nothing, but this is like the only
Mm,
thing that I can give you. And seeing that and seeing that action is like, when I go through things and when I have nothing, it's like, Lord, all I can give to you like is my worship. All I can give to you is my
mm,
heart, like, and I have nothing, but knowing that that is enough for the Lord. Like, and a lot of times we overcomplicate it and we feel like we need to be like all put together and perfected and like give so much
mm,
and give an offering that's so large. But our worship and our
wow.
offering and our heart is so much more than anything else. Um, in this program that I'm in, we're reading like through the entire Bible, like during the 9 months that we're here. And I was going through Genesis, and I was like, I've I've read through Genesis. Like that was kind of like my
Yeah. Did
mentality.
a
But
whole
I was
project on it when I was
like,
little.
yeah, right. So I was like, Lord, like, please just like allow me to see this in like a new way. Like, speak to me in a different way.
Mm,
So I was going through the story of Cain and Abel. And that's a story like you hear in like Sunday school, and it's just like, okay, Cain and Abel. But the Lord spoke to me like so much, like through the simplicity of that
mm,
story. But I like really took time to like observe like what was the difference between like Cain and Abel's offering. And like, it wasn't that Abel's offering was so much greater, and it wasn't that it came packaged any better than like what Cain's did. But the thing is that Abel's offering hurt. It truly hurt him to
mm,
give unto the Lord. There was no sacrifice that came through Cain's offering. It was like, Lord, I have everything and I'm just going to give you it. But when it comes from a place that hurts, and when our sacrifice
mm.
comes from pain, and when it's like true sacrifice that
Amen.
hurts, like that's what made Abel's offering so much more pleasing to the Lord. It wasn't that it came packaged any differently. It was just that it hurt him, and it hurt to give. But there was so much glory in that, and there was so much favor in the Lord seeing his offering. So even in that, like, I was like, wow,
Mm,
like there's so much beauty in like our pain, and so much beauty in like our sacrifice and giving everything to the Lord when we have nothing. But yeah.
So, so beautiful. I've got to say, like, it as a person who's doing a podcast structurally pain, just about pain and what God can do with it. I just really appreciate how you talked about that, how you explained it, how you described it was just so beautiful,
Amen.
and raw too, because again, like we talk about sufferings and stuff like that, but to also understand offerings, what that's like, giving all of yourself to God,
Yes.
not just giving, well, I have enough, so here you go, Lord, but like giving to the
Mhm.
point where it hurts to show God that like
Right.
I'm simply here to love and worship you and to serve you, God, and to serve your kingdom and not to serve myself and not to put
Mhm.
myself first. And just the journey. I really do love um just everything that God has revealed to you, to get to that point of understanding. Because I think that a lot of the times we read a book of the Bible and we're like, got it, all set. But then we go back and it's like this new revelation. It's like I completely went over that the first time. So,
Right.
so incredibly beautiful. And I wanted, and I, one of my questions I was going to ask you is like, what have you learned from losing everything? Like what was that like? And I feel like you just touched in on that just now, just the way that you described it. But like looking back at it now, right? Like looking back at little you, that transition that you lived, those moments of anger that you lived in, and before you came to the realization that you have now, what would you say that you've learned from losing everything?
Oh, um, wow. Yeah, I feel like a lot of um, well, I'm trying to like figure out like how to word it. But I feel like something that I've learned from like losing everything is just kind of like how I mentioned before, is like the reliance and like the consistency of the Lord. I feel like
Mm,
when you're so constantly, and like even like recent like things, when I so constantly like stripped of so much, and like there's so much loss and so much losing, it's like trying to, and it's so hard for us in like our human minds to like grasp it and understand it.
mm,
But trying to understand like the consistency of the Lord like through all of it, and understanding that like through every season, through every trial, like the Lord has never changed the way that he loves us. And things can come our way, but the way he loves us like remains the same. He never changes his goodness, he never changes his mercy. And just being, I feel like when we're even able to hold on to like a glimpse of that and hold on to that understanding, like
mm,
when things start coming our way, it's like, okay, I'm losing this again, but like, Lord, you're
mm.
constant. Okay, I'm losing
Yeah.
everything I've known for the last 7 years, but Lord, you're constant. And like, I feel like kind of like losing, I mean, it comes with like pros and cons almost. I feel like
Yeah.
because I was so used to, or have been in the past, like so used to losing everything, I became so like detached from everything. So when the Lord would kind of remove it from me, I'd just be like, okay, well, there it
Mm,
is again. But also that something now that I've been learning is that that's also not an attitude to have, and like you need to be balanced in like both areas of like, I can let you in and I can attach myself to you, and understand that it's okay to let people in, but also be
yeah.
like, if the Lord takes you out, then it's okay because you were there for a season and you still taught me something. But I am allowed to get close to you, and I'm allowed to love you, and I'm allowed to allow you to love me. So I feel
Mm,
like now being here over the last month, that's something that the Lord has been teaching me, because I feel like when you go through like so much pain and so much loss, and you kind of like I said, I kind of became like very like angry and like strong, and I was like, nope, the point that I always needed to prove was
yeah.
like, I am strong, I have it under control. But like during this last month, like the Lord has been like breaking down like so many walls, and it's been like, no, like you
Wow.
have to have balance. Like you have to allow people in. Like we
Yeah.
are created to fellowship. We are created to like lean on
Mm,
one another and like be there for one another, and like we're we can see like different facets of who the Lord is like through people. And if we're never allowing people in, we're never going to see a part of who he is in that person. So
mm,
I feel like
yeah.
something that I've been learning is like balance and being like, yes, the Lord has been the only constant thing, but he brings things into our lives and takes them out when he pleases, but it's for a reason. And just like I feel like that's something that like I've been learning is he's constant, but I'm allowed to let people in, and if he takes them out, at least I love them and they served like their purpose in my life, and I served a purpose in their life. And just like
Mm.
being okay with that balance of like both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really beautiful how you described everything and how God really will just make you reflect and show you what needs to be worked on, even though it's been a long journey of healing, a long journey of recognizing God's hand. Because
Hmm.
we can be in the valley, and sometimes it's really hard to notice Him next to us when we're so caught up in the trenches and how many times we trip or how many times we fall over. So you talked about earlier in the beginning how you discovered dance, how you discovered, what that was like for you. So talk a little bit about that. Do you remember just what that was like for you when you discovered that outlet and you had that fresh breath of air?
Yes. So honestly, like even in that, there was like so much like so much like struggle, but that was like
Mm,
but I knew that that was something that the Lord had like given me. But I feel like a lot of times when the Lord gives us something, the world tries to take it away from us because he knows that like
yes.
that's how we communicate with him. And like honestly, that's what like dance is for me. Like that's my like way of communicating with the Lord. And then I feel like when the enemy like sees that and it's like, okay, you were given this gift or you were given this, or like the enemy immediately tries to like attack it, and it's like, how can I stop
Mm,
you from that? How can I take your worship away from you? How can I take that outlet away from you? Um
yeah.
but yeah, no, so like growing up, I was like I love dance. And then I remember like always like doing it like in church, and I just remember like doing like the little specials and like for Christmas, and like you'd come out with like your little wings and like whatever. I just
Aw.
like always enjoyed it, and it was something so special to me. But like I said, like sometimes the world tries to like take that away. So during the time that my mom had been in the hospital, I feel like the way that people would try to comfort me was like they'd give me food, which is kind of a odd concept, but like I feel like people like naturally would be like, "Oh, you're sad? Let me take you out for ice cream." But that was like such a constant
Mm,
thing. So for
yeah.
like all those months that my mom, like those 2 months that my mom was in the hospital, and like even after that, there was nobody cooking in my house. There was like no, I wasn't like being fed properly. So during those like that month, and then like those 2 months, but even after that, like while my mom was like recovering, I like gained like so much weight so rapidly. And in the dance world, like very much it's about like you have to like look a certain way,
Mm,
and like you see ballerinas and they're like extremely skinny, and that's like
yeah.
the
That
picture perfect
standard.
thing. Yeah, it's a standard. And then like even growing up, you're like, wow, like you kind of start realizing you're like, oh, like I kind of don't look like that. Like I'm not,
Yeah. Mm,
that's not like the way that I'm looking right now. But for me, like it wasn't something that like I had like realized until like somebody had like brought it to my attention. I remember like one day I was in a class, and then they had told us to go do a handstand, and the girl that was in front of me was like very thin, and
mm,
the teacher was like, make sure you do it exactly like her. And I was like, okay. So I went up and I did my handstand. I was probably like 11 at that time. So I did my handstand, and when I came back down, she was like, well, you're not going to do it like her because she's skinny and you're not. And like that was something that
mm,
like I was like, wait a minute,
yeah.
that's like that's
Yeah.
true. And then it kind of started becoming like, well, I'm not worthy enough to dance because I'm not thin.
Mm.
um I can't be doing that because I'm not thin. Like, dance shouldn't
Yeah.
be given to me. Like, that's not a gift for me anymore because I'm not thin. And that was like something that was like so on repeat. And then actually I ended up like quitting dance for a year. And
Mm.
I was like, no, like,
That
I don't want to
seed was
do it.
planted in you.
Yeah, exactly. And it was something that like kept like festering. And it was like sometimes we don't like realize like how much like a simple word will be so like embedded in us. So like that was something that like I was like, "Oh wait, like I don't want to dance. Like I don't want to like do this anymore." But then like I like, because already during this time, like, I'm not being like super verbal with my emotions. And then like now dance is taken from me. And then I'm just like, I like truly didn't know like what to do. And then I ended up like, um, a year later, I ended up like returning back to the place where I was like dancing. But that was like something that I had like struggled with for like so long, like um, trying to access the gift that the Lord had given me when my mind was telling me that I
Mm.
wasn't worthy of it because of a standard that the world had put on me. And like this is like
Yeah.
the Lord literally calls us like for things that we are not qualified for. Like the Lord called the most randomest people like in the Bible. Like he called Moses to speak and he had like a stuttering issue. Like it's like he calls like
Yeah.
people that aren't qualified. And like that's the beauty in it, is that like no, like we
Mm.
can't do it. Like we truly can't do it, but the Lord is so
Yeah.
glorified
Amen.
through it, and so glorified like when we are like lacking. um so yeah, it's been so much of like a back and forth like with me and dance, because then like I started growing up and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, like, well, if I want to dance, like now I need to lose like all this weight. And it like that even became like such a toxic relationship like with me, in the way that like I viewed food. And then like it was like, okay, well, like there was so
Mm.
much back and forth because of like a simple word that was like spoken
Mhm.
over me. And like that's why I said like in the beginning, when like you had asked me like about dance, like it had always been a part of my life, but I never in a million years like would have imagined that like I would be doing it in a professional manner, in a scale that I am doing it now, because there was so much back and forth in
Mm.
that. But little by little, like I feel like I started learning that like that was the way that the Lord like speaks to me, and that I'm like truly allowed to
Mm.
like let so much go. And I feel like the time where I was able to see it the most, my leader had always my dance leader at my church, she had always told me, she was like, you start seeing um you start seeing things differently when like you're kind of like leading things. And I was like, I don't understand what that means. And then
Mm.
during the season, she ends up going through like an extremely rough time. And I end up kind of like taking over the ministry. And I'm literally like 16 at
Mm.
this point. Like, I'm like, I am not qualified for this. I'm like, I have no
Mm.
idea like how to do this. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how to like run
Yeah.
this. Like, I'm 16. Like, that's another thing. The Lord calls people young. Like you see it in Jeremiah. Like
Yeah.
that's not a thing. The Lord calls people whenever He wants to call them. But during this
Wow.
season,
True.
like it was like, okay, like it was kind of like I was placed in a season where I needed to start sharing what the Lord gave me. So
Mm.
it was like I feel like there was so much freedom for me in that season, because now it wasn't only a this is the way I communicate. It was like this is my pain and this is what I'm going through. And like now I get to create something with it. And now I get to create a dance and like pour it out there and have like it minister to people. And it was something so different to for me, because even then like I had to refine dance in my quiet time. I had to refine like different things, and like the reason why I like truly love dance away from all the voices. And even then to like allow myself to share it and to allow critique to come. but not to let it tear
Mm.
me down. Just to kind of take it as it is and be like, okay, like yes, but not to
Yeah.
let it tear it down like that one word did like such a long time ago for me.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, dance during that season, I feel like it kind of became more of an outward expression, and I started like really sharing like why, my original why, which that goes back to like what it was for me, which was like just simply a therapy. Like when I had nobody,
Yeah.
when there was nothing going on, like it was like, I'm gonna play my music and sit here and like I
Mhm.
like just small things like that, like just sit here and like play music and like, Lord, like this is how I'm feeling and I don't have the words to describe it, but like I'm gonna just move to
Mm.
this song that explains like the way that I'm feeling. So it was just that, and there was like so much freedom like in that season of like having to share as well. But no, it that has been a roller coaster, but the Lord, when the Lord calls, like he will do whatever it
Yeah.
takes like for us to like get to that calling, even if we have like we're just really stubborn sometimes and we won't
Yes.
listen the first time he calls, and sometimes he has to like take some extreme measures so that we can
Yeah.
get there. But no,
If
yeah.
they'll start leaving voice messages, little back and forth of like, "Hey, it's me again. Just leaving another
Yeah.
message, hoping you pick up."
Like just a reminder.
Just in case you forgot. No,
Yeah.
but I absolutely agree. I think God calls, I mean, when God calls you, he doesn't have worldly expectation because he made you. So he
Yes.
knows what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. And it's not even a matter of like, do I have all of the things that I need to do this? Do I
Right.
have all of the knowledge that I need to do this? Because when he calls you and you might be thinking like, oh, I'm in this career, so I must be doing what God has for me. And then he'll like
Mm,
uproot the floor from you and say, no, that's
yes.
not what I have for you. Although it's a season of education that you'll get
Mhm.
to use later on in life, it's definitely what I have in store for you. And
Right.
it's so unique according to the person, because like listening to you
Mhm.
talk about dance and how you move to the song, I think is so beautiful because this is how you know it's specifically for you. So after interviewing, a certain amount of people, I truly have discovered, I guess through the looking glass, kind of like just listening and watching people
Right.
describe what God has done in their lives. I have seen people talk about fashion in such a way that I could never understand, in a way that like I thought I liked clothes, but from a consumer, perspective,
Yeah.
not from the designer perspective. And just, how people have a heart for the Lord and other very sensitive topics such as abortion, and like how people have, a heart for the youth, and how people have a heart for just making sure that they're there for people, that like the mercy and hosting, and just like you can tell how God uniquely gave each person a gift, whether it's like a musician can listen to notes and create, and a dancer can listen to those same notes and with their body respond. And it's a beautiful thing that can only be done with the creation that God has created. And even if you like take a step back and you look at trees and you see how
Mm,
they blow together in the wind and how they communicate back and forth, and how nature seems to do a fantastic job. Like, if we weren't
yes.
getting so involved in cutting trees down and all of this stuff, squirrels wouldn't have to dig through the trash like they do, because
Mm,
in a world where everything's left into God's design, it flows so beautifully, and it
right.
can be trusted to survive, because like it says in the Bible, like the flowers don't have to worry, the birds don't have to worry. So it's a really beautiful thing. And to live in that space that you've discovered, which is like, you know this is my calling, and this is what I love to do, and this is what God made me for and has called me to do. But then also to live in a place where everything was taken from you, and then say like, it hurt, but I understand it. It's not about what God gives me, but who I am in those moments with the Lord. So incredibly beautiful, and so beautifully said, because you have to go through it to get to that point, you know in a
Yes.
world where you hadn't lost everything, where you didn't experience everything. I want to believe that you probably wouldn't have seen it the same way that you do now,
Mm,
and that could only be met
yeah.
through the valley in which you were in. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
And
and I
so,
feel like a lot. Oh, sorry.
oh no, you're good, good, good. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I didn't know if you were gonna say something. But I feel like a lot of times, like we want like the glory without going through the process. And like
Mm,
I feel like you see that so much like in the Bible, like Joseph, like if he wouldn't have gone through like that betrayal and like his brothers literally selling him, like he would have never got into
mm,
the palace. But like a lot of times we just want to be
yeah.
like, Lord, like just take me to like the highest place. But like he's like, no, like there's so much that you have to like learn through the process, and there's so much that you have to learn through like the people that come your way or the things that you lose. And like a lot of times like we just want the glory without the pain, and like or like we want
Mm,
that favor of the Lord like without the pain of the sacrifice, and we want the Lord to see us and like honor us and favor us, if but we're not giving him anything that hurts. um
mm,
but no, like I
amen.
wrote something down the other day. I'm trying to, okay, I found it. But in like we're working on this dance for like our at the company that I'm at, and we're doing this song that's called Anthem of Praise. And there's this
Mm,
part in the song that's just like it's literally just her like singing holy and like worthy and like on repeat. And
mm,
something that I wrote down is like the meaning of the word worthy is having or showing qualities and ability and qualities or abilities that merit recognition. And then like what I wrote under that is
mm,
that his character makes him worthy, not by what he does, but simply who he is. And like having to
amen.
understand that and be like, Lord, if you did nothing for me, like just who you are is enough. Like just what you've done for
Yeah,
others is enough. Like if you never do anything else for me, like can I be okay with still like praising the Lord? Like can I be okay with still worshiping the Lord if he never does anything for me? If he never takes away my pain? If my pain keeps getting added onto, like am I okay with understanding that he is still worthy and he is still holy because it's his character, and it's not what he does, and it's not what he does for us, but like he is holy and he is worthy because of who he is, and like everything in his character makes him deserve the glory, not because of anything he's done for us, but like being able to be like, Lord, like if you do nothing for me, like will I truly still love you the same? Will I still give you like
yeah,
all the glory and the honor to be able to like praise you in my pain until I see that glory? And like even if the glory doesn't come, like he's still good because of who he is.
yes.
um but
Amen.
sorry, I need water for a
No,
second.
you're living water. We all need it. I love, 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 love what you were saying and how you said it, and just like it's true. I think recently I felt like God told me like a month or so ago was like, if all I ever asked, if like if or kind of like the idea came to my mind of like, if I die today, it's like the Holy Spirit was saying, if you
Mm,
die today, and this is where I wanted you, like if I called you home today, and this was
wow.
your purpose to get to today, do you understand that, like, would you die happy? Like, would you be
Mm,
fulfilled, or will you continue to like feel like,
wow.
because I feel like a lot of the times we feel like I could have done more, I could do better, I could get better, I could, improve in this and that. And I think that God was simply saying to me, I think he was just saying like, if this is as far as I've ever wanted you to get, like, would that be okay for you? Like, could you
Wow.
worship me knowing that this is as far as I wanted you to get? And it humbled me because I was like, wow, God, like, I don't know when my last day will be,
Mm,
but I can worship you in every day and know like if this is as far as God wants me to get, then this is the best place for me to possibly be.
wow.
And so I love what you said, and I loved how you explained it. And I don't know why, but Lightning McQueen is coming to my head, like the first Cars movie where, he's this big shot guy and he is in the glory, but then he kind of gets lost, and not on
Yeah.
purpose, but he ends up in a place that kind of really humbles him because there are people around him who are like, this is a community, we care about one another. And he finds out for the first time like, I've been doing this on my own, and
Mm,
discovering community, discovering love, discovering that, to the point where like when he is shoot away at the end of the movie, and when he gets picked up and goes to the race, like he can't take his mind off of, I remember like there's that clip where he's thinking about the road, the curvy long road with the trees, driving behind Sally, I think her name is. And he's in a race. And so it really just speaks to you of like, we might have this particular idea of ourselves and what we think is glory and greatness, but God might have a very different idea, and it might be very humbling, and it might be that person, who is the supporting person or the people who are in the background and not on the stage. And that, I
Mhm.
mean, if we don't have the people in the background, if we don't have the setup people, the door openers,
Right.
we don't have a stage. We don't have,
Mhm.
you know, the lights. We don't have the system. We don't have the music. And so, like, God's just designed this beautiful, beautiful tapestry and gears that work together. But we first need to be in sync with God and know humbly
Yes.
who He is in our lives to perform in such a way. So, like, just I feel like even for me in this interview has been such a like Sunday morning for me, because everything you've said has been so beautiful and filling and so full of the spirit and that guidance that God has in your life. And so, like, before we come to an end, I just want to ask you, like, of course, like, with everything that we've discussed and everything that you've learned, like, what would you say God has done with your pain? Like, what would you say, like, this is what God has done with me and my pain?
Yes. So honestly, like, it was kind of funny, like when you were talking about Lightning McQueen, and like I was about to start crying. I was like, why is that ministering to me right now? But like when you were saying that, like he for so long had been like doing it on his own, and then like all of a sudden he
Mm,
gets like introduced to like a community. Even in the last month, like that is what the Lord has like that's what the Lord has done for me. And
mm,
we were in like a worship class like this past week, and I have I've like remotely shared a little bit of like my story with people, but not like fully. And it's like so insane when the Lord like gives you a word and it's like, I know that's from you because there's no way they could have known that. But this
yeah.
girl, she came up to me and she started sharing that. She said that she saw like a vision of me like crying as a little girl. And she said
Mm,
that in every season of my life, like it was like different pictures of me crying. And she said that
mm,
in some, like she would see like how the Lord would like wipe away my tears. Um,
mm,
and then she said that all of a sudden, like it flashed into like a different image, and that it was me like in an ocean of like my own tears and like my own pain. And like
mm,
I was kind of trying to like cover it up and like clean it up and like fix it. Um,
mm,
and then something that she told me, she was like, allow yourself to like be in community and allow yourself to like let other people like wipe away your tears. Like let the Lord like wipe away your tears and like your pain. So for like the longest time, I feel like my pain had so much attachment to like anger and me trying to do it on my own, and like me trying to be like this hard like person. And I feel like we don't do it on purpose, but I feel like a lot of times because of like the pain that we go through, it'll turn us into like such a hard shell because like we go through so much pain that we don't want any more pain. So we're like, if I can close myself
mm,
off from everything and everyone and not feel pain, like that's what I'm gonna do. So I feel like that had been like something so constant for me. And like you said, like Lightning McQueen was doing it on by himself for so long. And like I have been like doing it by myself for so long, and I've been like, no, like
mm,
I don't need anybody. But like that's not what the Lord has like called us to do, or like called us to be. Like we're
mm,
allowed to like rely on one another and speak to one another and encourage one another. So like back to what you were saying, like what has the Lord done with my pain? Like honestly, like the Lord has like completely transformed my heart and my idea of pain, and changing it from okay, I went through pain, so like now I'm angry and now I'm closed off and I'm not going to let anybody in, and changing it into a okay, I've been through this and I've felt all these things and I've gone through all these seasons and I've been through betrayal and I've been through so much, not because I'm supposed to bottle it up and put walls in, but because
mm,
the Lord is teaching me to be gentle, and the Lord is teaching me to like share. And like now that I've gone through all this, like I can relate. And like now,
yeah.
like if somebody comes with their pain, it's like I've been there. like let me tell you about how like there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like let me tell you about like how I've been through it. Let me tell you about how the story of Job has like been such an
Mhm.
anchor for me in like the worst moments of my life. So like I feel like even during this last
Amen.
month, like the Lord has like changed my idea and like my view of like, okay, I've been through pain and I'm closed off. And it's like, no, like I'm changing your heart and I'm changing it. And like it's been torn apart, but like there's so much more that you're allowed to hang on to. And there's something that I'm like learning now is that there's so much beauty in brokenness. And a lot of times
Mm,
like we feel like we're not allowed to like talk about it and that we're not allowed to share it, but like the Lord can never be glorified if we're not broken. The Lord can't be him
mm,
and he can't be a mender and he can't be someone who like consoles us if we're never broken. And like
mm,
there's so much beauty and like brokenness and being like, Lord, like I truly can't do it. And like I can't, and like us and our humanity, like we can't do it. But when we come to the Lord and we're like, Lord, like kind of like how as I was saying before, like Lord, I have nothing but my pain. Like and
yeah.
let that be worship onto
Mm,
you. So I feel like that's what I
amen.
would say. Like the Lord has changed like my pain into worship. And
Wow.
he has just wow, like I was kind of thinking like no, like as I was like kind of like thinking through it right now is that like that's what I can say is that like he's changed my pain like into worship. And like it I feel like a
Wow.
lot of times like we close ourselves off from that and that idea of that like
Mhm.
our pain can't be something that is going to bring him glory, but it brings him so much glory like when we are allow ourselves to be like
Mhm.
mended and like re-brought back together. Because like when we're giving everything that we have in sacrifice and in worship, and it's like, Lord, like here I am, like here are like all my broken pieces and I don't know how to put myself back together, but like I know you can do it. Like I know you can like transform like my heart being torn in a million pieces and like just transform it for your glory. And like um some a verse that like just came like to mind, it's like that verse that's like you've turned like my mourning to dancing. And like that's like truly what I can say is
Mm.
that like both in
It's
like
literal.
a symbolic way, but like in a literal way, like he's turned like my mourning into dancing. And like everything I've been through is like has led me to this point right now. And that if I've never been through that mourning, like I can never understand and dance in a way that can minister to somebody else.
Mm.
I would never understand and speak in a way that can minister to somebody else. Like if I would have never gone through what I've gone through, like my mourning, like my dancing wouldn't be dancing, like my joy wouldn't be joy, like it would be something that's so temporary because we're so constantly like clinging on to things that make us happy so fast. But like if we're not finding our joy and our dancing and like all of that like in the Lord, we're not doing anything. So like truly like
Mm.
what the Lord has done with my pain is like transformed my mourning like into dancing.
Wow.
So that's what I would say.
That's amazing. I honestly couldn't even ask for a better answer. That was beautiful. Just like the way that you just the path that you took me on from the moment I asked the question to the moment we got there. Just so incredible. And like I just praise God for like his hand over your life and what he has done and how he's done it and how he's done it specifically for you and curated it for you, and just seeing that goodness and then you being able to come on the podcast about pain and recognize that pain and say this is what God has done with my pain. Because like you said earlier, which I loved, normalizing pain, because or more of like normalizing that pain is real, that it happens, that it
Hmm.
exists, and allowing people to have an outlet of how to bring that pain forward. Or even to hear someone else say like I've lost everything, or I've had this happen and I've had this happen, and they say like wow, like I've had that happen to me, and I didn't think anyone else
Right.
truly understood what that was like, like what that experience was like. And to be that for someone, after everything and God's goodness and just how he's been there for us in those seasons of our lives, and us, like you said, be able to minister that way to other people is so, so beautiful. So I really just have to, again, like, I praise God for you, and I praise Him for
Amen.
just your willingness to come on the podcast and your willingness to just be so vulnerable, but also just like it says in the Bible, testimony is so powerful and it's so beautiful, and
Yes.
it's, it carries so much truth. And so I'm thankful for your testimony. I'm thankful for, you sharing it. And I just praise God over and over again for turning your mourning into dancing and living that scripture out the way that you are.
Amen.
I think that in this new journey that you're on, of course, God is going to do some really incredible things. Um, and after being so busy and still making time to be on the podcast, I think that with us coming to this end now, all I can, or the last note that I'll leave us on is, I encourage you to rest, girl. Like, whenever you can, and you have the time to do it, get some rest after moving and all of these new things that you've been doing and being on the podcast. I think that you've earned yourself some really good rest and a good nap, because like it says in the
Yes,
Bible, I
good
think, I
nap.
don't remember who it was, but he sent someone to go take, yeah, he sent someone
Yes.
to take a nap. I can't remember who it is.
No, I know. I
And
I
so
lost it, but I know who you're talking about.
yeah, so whenever I'm being grumpy or overwhelmed, I'm like, I probably need to take a nap at this point and let God, re-energize me, because clearly today is not the day. But I really just am so thankful, and honestly, like, thank you so much for being on this podcast. And I'm just so excited for when your episode comes out.
No, thank you so much just for inviting me. Like the second I saw your email pop up, I was like immediately yes. But it's so beautiful, like even to see like your yes and like the glory that's like that the glory that's going to come from that as well, like you saying yes and like just speaking to so many people and like allowing like for us to be heard, but then also like allowing yourself to be used. It's just so
Mm.
beautiful. So I'm grateful for your life and just your yes.
Oh, amazing. Well, I guess we're both grateful. It's one of my favorite things is like when you put two Christians and Jesus lovers in a room, it's like back and forth gratefulness and
Yes.
compliments and like, no, I well, absolutely fantastic.